Continuing his unfinished journey to become a sorcerer, Chiron packed his luggage and said goodbye to his parents. Indeed, Chiron, now 17, had grown up a lot. The affectionate kiss in a warm embrace, though filled with lingering emotions, could not hold Chiron back from pursuing his dream. The butler waited outside, ready to speak as soon as the protagonist appeared. "Please get in the carriage. We will escort you to the academy." Before departing, Chiron enthusiastically waved and promised his parents that he would return soon. And so, the first day at the academy for the protagonist began. The horse-drawn carriage carrying the protagonist gradually disappeared into the distance. Inside the carriage, the protagonist sat awkwardly opposite the butler. After a while, they arrived at their destination. The carriage door was slowly opened by the butler, and the protagonist quickly stepped out. As soon as he stepped down, he was overwhelmed by the vastness and modernity of the academy where he was about to study. The butler reminded the protagonist that at Althea's academy, all tuition fees were covered by the Ogent family, so he only needed to focus on studying hard. Sincerely, the protagonist expressed his gratitude to the butler, feeling this was his chance to say thank you finally. He acknowledged that he was able to be there because the butler had valued him. The butler responded, "A commoner, no matter how talented, is still just a commoner, forever unable to surpass a noble." This statement made the protagonist feel a bit awkward about his status. The butler continued, "However, not everyone is given this opportunity. Once you join the academy, many nobles will not like you. Remember to persevere. If you persist until the end, everything will be fine." With that, the protagonist and the butler walked and talked as they headed inside. After helping the protagonist with the enrollment, the butler bid farewell. Left alone, the protagonist wondered who would come to meet him. Suddenly, he noticed a summary board. Althea's academy operated on a 10-rank system, with a total of 420 students, 30 of whom were in the graduating class. Surprised, the protagonist wondered if only 10 students graduated each year. While Chiron was lost in thought, a voice startled him. He quickly turned around and bowed to the headmaster. The headmaster smiled warmly. "We've met before, do you remember me?" Of course, Chiron could not forget. He showed great respect towards the headmaster. The headmaster then led him on a tour of the school, explaining that during the tour, he would have to take an entrance exam. However, it was just a simple test to determine his class placement. More surprisingly, the headmaster knew that Chiron could already access the spirit zone. For someone who could activate the spirit zone on their own, the headmaster wondered how talented Chiron must be and mused about how great he could have become if trained from a young age. As they toured the school, Chiron saw some strange sights. The headmaster led him to a classroom where students were studying. Upon entering, Chiron was amazed. Even in the freshman class, students from grades 10 to 8 were floating and using strange magic. This fascinated the protagonist. Everyone was using magic. However, according to the headmaster, the place they needed to go was slightly different. They continued walking to the intermediate classes from grades 7 to 4. As Chiron followed the headmaster, he curiously observed his surroundings, feeling the difference as he was surrounded by peers his age. They were enthusiastically discussing something, but he couldn't understand what they were saying even though they were speaking the same language. At that moment, a burst of fire suddenly startled him. A girl appeared, respectfully bowing to the headmaster. The headmaster slowly spoke, "All right, there are some issues that need immediate attention." Seeing the girl's experiment, the headmaster advised, "It seems there's some imbalance between the input and output. Check if the current is balanced." The girl listened, thanked the headmaster, and promised to try again. The protagonist found it strange that no one around seemed to care about the explosion. Even the headmaster didn't stop her. Was she going to try again? It felt like Chiron was in a different world. At that moment, a red-haired female character appeared, passing by the protagonist. It seemed she would play a significant role in the protagonist's journey. While touring with the headmaster, Chiron was drawn to a bulletin board. It displayed the rankings of all the advanced classes, with Karmas at the top. Everyone listed there had talents similar to Chiron's, and he aspired to be among them. He resolved to start his studies anew at this place. Suddenly, someone called out, "Amy Karmas." Chiron quickly recognized the name from the rankings. Could she be the top student in the advanced class? She was walking alone, looking forlorn. When Chiron turned to look, he was struck with fear. Memories of his past started flooding back, scenes of him fighting off a gang of thugs while she watched him use magic. She had incessantly questioned him about where he learned such magic and how a commoner could possess such abilities. The sight of Amy now made Chiron incredibly anxious. Amy's eyes seemed to sense something. Chiron quickly moved aside to avoid encountering her. At that moment, another girl rushed over to Amy. From his hiding spot, Chiron silently prayed she wouldn't notice him. However, their conversation turned to him. Did you see that guy we just passed by? He's handsome. Is he a new student? Though Amy was cold, she was also sharp and observant. I think I've seen him before, she mused. Their conversation drew the attention of the surrounding male students. Amy Carmus was the most famous girl in the advanced class. She had rejected countless confessions from seniors, juniors, and classmates alike. She was a model student, but the only person who knew her dark past was trying to pass the entrance exam. The scene shifted to the third examination area of the Magic Academy. The headmaster advised Chiron to closely observe what the children were doing. Chiron paid special attention, per the headmaster's instruction. As they watched, the headmaster explained, when you enter the spirit zone, you will see letters on the walls in different colors. How you perceive them will help us determine the size, power, flexibility, and tendencies of your spirit zone. Just answer the professor's questions honestly. A professor then addressed a student, Cami, try entering the spirit zone. Yes, I'm in. The furthest number is 6. 6, the headmaster explained to the still confused Chiron. A 6-meter diameter means the spirit zone's range is 6 meters. Another professor asked, what color seems the strongest? Red. I feel like I'm entering a red world, like light and fire. This indicated the student's tendency to work with various divergences, meaning their spirit zone was much stronger than typical for their age. Do you see the huge tower? It's on your left. How does the temperature feel? It's a bit hot. I'm sweating. After Cami's test, the professors remarked on how impressive the new students were this year. It seems the quality of students improves each year. Next was Adrian Chiron. The headmaster patted his shoulder. Show them your skills. The professors were intrigued. So, this is the child who underwent the special test mentioned by the headmaster. But he seems quite old. Borrowing the name of a noble family, isn't his family famous? It seems they discovered his talent a bit late. Even the professor had to admit, his appearance was striking. But at this school, he would soon be overshadowed. Chiron, can you use magic? One professor asked. Surprised, Chiron replied, no, I haven't studied it before. The headmaster had expected this reaction. That's what they'll think. Magic involves bringing knowledge into your mind. Noble children are taught various things and can naturally use magic. But this child does not know at all. Putting that aside, the professor continued, all right then, step into the circle and enter your spirit zone. Slowly, Chiron entered the spirit world, where everything around him became clear. Finally, he understood. Now, Chiron, tell us the furthest number you see, instructed the professor. Chiron was deep in thought, unable to answer. The headmaster, standing outside, was also anxious for him. Answer quickly. We're not categorizing you, we're just trying to find the best way to educate you. Chiron hesitated. I see a number, but it's so long I can't read it. The professor was astonished. You can't read it? It's based on your perception, not vision. Chiron clarified, no, I mean I can feel it, but it's too long. It's still getting longer. Then start with the first numbers you see. Chiron focused on identifying the numbers, a seemingly endless sequence. Finally, he began to make out the first number. It's 3.14. The professors were astonished. It was rare, but sometimes the number pi appeared. This meant the spirit zone size exceeded the limits they had established. Chiron could perceive up to 30 meters. What is the strongest color you see? Observing, Chiron replied, blue, entirely blue. The professors exchanged glances. If it was truly blue, then it indicated a convergence type. But could his spirit zone be that large? A convergence type with such resilience exceeding the size of the spirit zone? Contrary to the divergence type, the headmaster began to understand why Clump was so insistent about this. But this wasn't just an ordinary talent. On the professor's notes about Chiron, phrases like, both hemispheres convergence, were written. Another professor asked, how many orbs are floating around? Chiron didn't need to count them individually because he could feel it, 867. Hearing this, the professor's face suddenly turned pale. The headmaster was equally frightened and anxious. The purple-haired professor adjusted his glasses to look at Chiron more closely. Chiron, how cold are you feeling right now? Very cold, to the point of freezing, Chiron replied. As the professors had anticipated, they were continuously jotting down notes about Chiron. His results were incredibly impressive. We need to decide which class the students will be placed in. All new students, please wait outside, said a professor. Following this instruction, Chiron and the other students left the room. As soon as they exited, a clamor erupted inside. How can a 17-year-old student have a spirit zone diameter of over 30 meters? The density of the spirit zone increases with its size, but this student's spirit zone density is 86.7%. And it's pure concentration without any enhancement skills. Could he be lying? The blonde-haired professor questioned skeptically. A 17-year-old with no knowledge of magic having a spirit zone density of 90% and a diameter of 30 meters? It's absurd. The purple-haired professor immediately rebutted, there's no reason for the students to lie. If they entered an advanced class this way, they wouldn't keep up, let alone pass exams. Moreover, remember that pi is displayed as an error code. It's not something an ordinary student would say just to attract attention. The blonde-haired professor was infuriated by this argument. The headmaster interjected, so, where should we place him? Sina Alifer, a 6th-level mage, suggested, Class 6 studies the development of spiritual power and its theories. Class 5 begins actual magic training. Given that his spirit zone is nearly complete, I propose placing him in Class 5. The blonde-haired professor objected, he's a 17-year-old with no knowledge of magic. This could cause problems and make him arrogant if placed in an advanced class. We should teach him from the basics. Their argument continued, but the other teachers discussed the matter more pragmatically. In the end, the headmaster decided to place Chiron in Class 7. The Magic Academy had a system with 10 classes based on evaluations. Students were divided into 3 groups: elementary, classes 10 to 8, focused on spirit zone development; advanced, classes 7 to 4, on using magic and their spirit zones; and the graduation group, classes 3 to 1, on rigorous training for professional mages. Today marked the day Chiron donned the Alpheus Academy student uniform. His presence immediately drew attention. He was placed in an intermediate class as a new student, people whispered. Chiron introduced himself, I'm Arian Chiron. Nice to meet you all. All eyes were on him. He had finally reached the prestigious Alpheus Magic Academy, which spanned 74.42 kilometers, including dormitories. It boasted 33 buildings and 40 training centers. Though students couldn't leave on weekdays, it wasn't inconvenient because all necessary facilities were on campus. Classes ended at 5, and the library, open 24 hours, was a popular spot for students with shared interests. These factors contributed to the academy's esteemed reputation. It was a place for nobles who had studied from a young age and endured long, challenging periods. Yet, through determination, Chiron was determined to keep up. In the chronological sequence of history ingrained in Chiron, he gradually accumulated all the knowledge of the world. That morning, as the bell rang to signal the end of the class, Chiron immediately thought of his next plan. The afternoon class was practical spirit zone training, but as a newcomer, he wasn't sure where to go. Looking around quickly, he noticed someone about his age. He approached the students and greeted them. Hi. Hello. Do you know which training center we need to go to? The purple-haired girl turned around, startled. Chiron observed that she seemed quite shy. Surprised by his relaxed demeanor, the girl replied, Oh, you must not know. Today's practical class is at the 2nd Integrated Training Center. Integrated training? Chiron asked, puzzled. The girl explained, all the intermediate classes will be training together for 2 weeks. This information made Chiron think deeply. Training with all the intermediate classes? The scene shifted to the 2nd Integrated Training Center, where the noise of the students was increasing. The commotion was due to the appearance of Amy. Watching from a distance, Chiron couldn't help but acknowledge her fame. She was someone he didn't want to interact with, but there were 2 joint training sessions each week. If she started in the intermediate class, she would soon move to the graduation class. Chiron felt anxious, wondering if he could remain invisible. At that moment, the special teacher for the intermediate spirit zone class, Ithella Romite, appeared. Introducing herself, she said, I am Ithella, and I will be in charge of your spirit zone class. This year, we have some new students who have transferred from beginner classes, haven't we? Despite the famous faces in our class, we have a new student joining the intermediate class today. All eyes turned to Chiron, making him feel the danger of such attention. Ithella added, Chiron, stand up and introduce yourself. With growing fear and an increasingly anxious expression, Chiron stood up reluctantly. After his introduction, the students applauded encouragingly. Amy, however, fell into deep thought. This is the first time I've heard his name. He seems somewhat famous. Shouldn't I know all the notable students? Amy pondered. Another student chimed in, according to my sources, the teachers are very focused on him. They say his stats were excellent during the entrance exam. Hearing this, Amy's attitude shifted, her eyes becoming distant. Her hair swayed as memories flashed before her eyes, a young boy proficient in magic. Where did you learn magic? How could a commoner like you, she had once questioned. Amy could recall everything vividly thanks to her Karmas bloodline. Her unique red eyes allowed her to remember every moment she witnessed, making learning seem redundant. From a young age, Amy was exceptionally talented, the most gifted among her siblings, often praised by her father. But eventually, she grew tired of constant praise and felt a deep-seated anger towards her family. My abilities have nothing to do with this family. I can achieve everything on my own, she thought. The one who had forced her to rethink was a lowly boy. At that moment, as Chiron introduced himself nervously, Amy recognized him as the boy she had humiliated years ago. 5 years earlier, she had cruelly said, "A slave without claws, right? Then stripping you naked makes sense." Amy worried that Chiron might expose her past misdeeds, recalling how she had associated with thugs in dark alleys. Despite her cold and famous reputation, she had once been fascinated by dangerous men. Fearing exposure, Amy tore up her paper in anger. "No, I can't let this happen. I must kill the rumor before it starts," she vowed. As Chiron introduced himself, he felt a chill run down his spine. "Enough introductions," Ithella said, redirecting the class's focus. "What exactly is a spirit zone?" "It's the perception of a mage's mental state. Its initial form is a sphere, as it's the easiest shape to focus on. Through practical training, we can perceive and transform it as we wish. It's also known as a spirit zone image." Immediately, Romy Ithella created a spirit zone. This was the first time Chiron had seen a spirit zone manifest in reality. The sphere of the spirit zone was 10 meters in diameter. The teacher continued her lecture, explaining that this was the basic spherical shape of a spirit zone. However, in practice, the spherical shape is rarely used. For a more practical example, she used magic to target a goal outside her spirit zone, which had a range of 10 meters. The target was 20 meters away. She used Fireball, a fire-type spell. First, she created a small flame and then, with a swift motion, shot it straight towards the target. The students were amazed to see the flame disappear. The reason it disappeared was that magic can only exist within a spirit zone. However, if you extend the spirit zone towards the target, you can reach it just like the flame did. The students, after hearing the teacher's explanation, were enlightened. Even the older students smiled at the younger ones' reactions. Chiron, too, was astonished to learn that spirit zones could function this way. However, the teacher cautioned that this method had a weakness, which worried the students. She clarified that changing the shape of the spirit zone requires a lot of concentration, especially in combat. When an opponent can attack in various ways, constantly altering the spirit zone's shape isn't practical. Hence, spirit zones are classified into 4 main shapes: defensive, attacking, targeting, and deviation. The defensive shape is an octagon, which maximizes the spirit zone's defensive capabilities. The more contact faces it has, the higher its defense. The star shape is for offense, allowing easy targeting. The brightest point indicates the direction of the target. The targeting shape is highly effective for long-range combat but less so for fast-moving targets. The distance between the points and the center makes it hard to rotate quickly. Speed is crucial when using this shape. The students were impressed, noting how effortlessly the teacher demonstrated these techniques. Finally, there's the deviation shape, which is rarely used because even 5th-year students struggle to master it. The teacher prepared to demonstrate a new, more complex example, silencing even the most boastful students. Chiron was no exception to the amazement. The spirit zone detached from the teacher's body. Chiron didn't understand how a spirit zone, the mage's mental state, could separate from the body. Ithella explained that the deviation shape is extremely difficult, even for experienced mages. Its advantage is that the mage is not the center of the spirit zone, allowing unrestricted movement. It enables instantaneous spell casting with unlimited range. The spell activates upon contact with the target. Students marveled at the teacher's ease with the technique. Being a level 6 mage, her gentle demeanor concealed extraordinary talent. To keep things interesting, the teacher invited the top student in the quick targeting magic test, Amy Karmas from Class 4. The students cheered for her. Despite her reputation, Amy seemed unwilling to stand out, her mood dark and chaotic. Analyzing the first of the 4 spirit zone shapes, targeting, it's advantageous for long-range attacks but ineffective against fast-moving or multiple targets. However, if someone with excellent focus and control uses it, it becomes nearly perfect. The initial weakness is negated, turning it into an impenetrable fortress against distant enemies. The students watched Amy's movements with admiration. Typically, participants switch between the 4 shapes, but Amy always came out on top using only the targeting shape. They wondered if they could become such skilled mages. Chiron, too, was in awe, realizing how amazing she was. She not only continuously changed the spirit zone's shape while standing still but also attacked all targets within the spirit zone sweep, even in a single dimension. Her face was expressionless, and every gesture exuded an air of noble elegance. Now Chiron understood why all the male students were so crazy about her. She wasn't just a high-ranking noble, she lacked nothing. She was perfect. Yet, Chiron couldn't help but be curious about her past. Why had she mingled with those street thugs? After Amy finished her demonstration, her skills summary included fast spell casting, achieving level 9 in just 20 seconds. Suddenly, Amy seemed to remember something. She stared blankly for a moment, then her gaze shifted directly to Chiron. This made him sweat with fear. Everyone around them buzzed with excitement at Amy's gaze. After that look, Amy shyly turned away, mentally chastising herself. Both of them realized they were thinking about the past. After the demonstration, the practice session was divided into classes as assigned by teacher Athela. The 7th graders started with the defensive shape. They had to master the defensive form first since mages needed to maintain concentration to survive on the battlefield. Chiron tried to practice and concluded that the trick was to imagine himself contracting and condensing. The first step was to condense the spirit zone and create a shape, then stabilize it to prevent collapse. To his surprise, Chiron succeeded on his first try, amazed at his accomplishment. However, he reminded himself that manifesting the spirit zone wasn't certain yet. It would be easier if he could see the spirit zone within the image zone. Chiron approached teacher Athela to ask about using the image zone. She was a bit surprised. Typically, only upperclassmen were allowed to use it first, but Chiron's perspective was that one shouldn't worry about others when learning magic since opportunities were rare. Slightly hesitant, the teacher allowed him to use it. Everyone became anxious upon learning that Chiron was about to demonstrate. Amy, upon hearing this, choked on her water and exclaimed in disbelief, "What is he doing? What can a 7th grader possibly achieve?" Students gathered around the image zone to watch. Chiron was ready, his eyes and face suddenly lighting up. He thought, "Finally, I see it, my spirit zone." A massive spirit zone appeared, leaving everyone in awe. The spirit zone size continued to increase on the measuring board. Even during the entrance exam, the equipment couldn't measure its size. Chiron's spirit zone extended to a range of 20 meters. 5th-year students were astonished. Is he a 7th grader? Isn't the average for 7th graders only 13 meters? If so, its density would drop to something like a balloon. Everyone focused intently on the size of Chiron's spirit zone. Despite the attention, Chiron concentrated, thinking, "I need to stop. I'm attracting too much attention. Time to form the defensive shape." But things started to slip out of control. The spirit zone structure began to collapse. Chiron was panicking. Amy, observing from afar, muttered, "No way he'll succeed on his first practice session, right?" Chiron, amidst his panic over the unruly spirit zone, questioned himself, "Am I scared because I'm seeing it in person? My concentration can't falter because of that." Then he wondered about the difference between inside and outside the image zone. After pondering, he realized he had misunderstood because Athela made it look so easy. Changing the spirit zone's shape requires concentration. So, if his intent to shrink the spirit zone affected it, he should just keep it at a normal size. The spirit zone continued to grow larger. Determined, Chiron watched as it expanded, the spirit zone size increasing continuously. Amy, watching from a distance, couldn't believe her eyes. What the heck? The spirit zone is getting bigger, taking over the entire classroom. Everyone stared in disbelief. Confidently, Chiron thought, "No need to adjust piece by piece. I'll shrink it all at once." And he did it. He perfectly condensed the spirit zone. Everyone looked at Chiron with admiration. The new student had succeeded on his first day. Even Chiron was amazed at what he had accomplished. It looked as if he was standing inside a gemstone. Teacher Athela nodded in approval, acknowledging that the exceptional convergence of the defensive form aided his success. It was remarkable for him to succeed on his first day. Amy's expression darkened. This boy, the source of her past humiliation, had come this far. He must have had support. Sooner or later, he would close the gap with the other classes, and his fame would only grow. Therefore, Amy decided to change her plan. She needed to approach him. Teacher Athela couldn't help but notice the protagonist's extraordinary abilities. He is remarkable in his all-round capabilities, as if he had spent his entire life training in the mountains, she thought. The protagonist reported to the teacher, "The size of the spirit zone has been reduced significantly." Teacher Athela nodded, "Ah, yes, the size has decreased, but the hardness of the spirit zone will increase. With this level of hardness, most physical impacts won't be able to break your spirit zone. Additionally, the hardness will give you some ability to resist mental attack magic. Well done." After stepping out of the spirit zone, the protagonist beamed with a radiant smile. From a distance, other students admired him and exclaimed, "Well done, new student. Congratulations." This made Chiron feel a bit embarrassed. Teacher Athela paid more attention, thinking, "I understand his wisdom in perfecting the defensive form. With his strong convergence ability and unusually large spirit zone, his success in this form is understandable. I need to keep an eye on him." At that moment, countless eyes were on Chiron, but not all with the same intention. Some were competitive, with whispers like, "Looks like he'll join our class soon, huh? His talent is truly amazing." On the first day, jealousy and envy were already brewing. The looks of annoyance towards the protagonist were evident, and finally, there was one particularly frightening gaze. The scene shifted to the next day, with another curious pair of eyes. This girl was opening the classroom door and stepping inside. As she entered, the other students burst into excitement. It was Professor Saina Alifer, who was in charge of the fifth-year class. Her appearance delighted many students. Who would have thought a 7th grader could attend her lecture? But the reason she took the time to teach the 7th grade was Chiron. She was determined to help Chiron advance as quickly as possible, insisting he must become one of her students. Immediately, the professor demonstrated a technique to create an icy aura. This blue ice aura seemed to spread out as she asked, "Can anyone here explain the theory behind this spell?" Chiron felt bewildered, looking around at the rising cold aura. What is cold aura? And what is the process of freezing? The students were confused. The professor explained, "You feel cold because you lack energy, but the term cold energy doesn't exist in this world. Therefore, the temperature can only increase infinitely but cannot decrease infinitely. When energy reaches absolute zero, we call that absolute zero. If we mix a bit of energy from this room, we can easily create something like this. But if we divide it into tiny pieces and create a convection current, what happens? The answer is that we can generate a cold intense enough to kill, as you've experienced." Surprised, the students trembled, thinking, "Are we going to die?" The professor continued her lecture with great enthusiasm. "So, the question here is, how can a mage absorb that energy? Without any tools or devices, how can they activate such magic?" The professor drew a circle representing a spirit zone and continuously explained, "A mage controls the world within the confines of their spirit zone, and of course, it's limited to a certain range. But once inside, the mage becomes like a god. If they want to influence the senses, they can create light, scent, or even physical sensations. This unique sensory ability allows mages to dominate reality specially." She continued, "However, even with such divine abilities, what if a mage doesn't know what they are capable of? The answer is that to activate magic, a mage must meet certain conditions, which are omnipotence and omniscience. According to the professor, mages activate magic based on their omnipotence and omniscience. No matter how powerful you are, without knowledge, you can't activate magic. That's why mages, besides having special senses, also study the world like scholars." Hearing this, Chiron realized why he couldn't use magic. He lacked the concept of omniscience and had only focused on omnipotence. The professor affirmed, "You will study numerous subjects at this school. The spirit zone is only half of what constitutes magic. Without hard work, you can't become a true mage. Now, we will start our basic chemistry lesson as instructed by the teacher." His eyes shone with an unparalleled determination. He could become a mage. Transitioning to the outside of the academy, the students were still engaged in lively discussions, primarily about their studies. After classes ended, students often went to the library or participated in research groups. Chiron also kept a habit for himself. Every day, he went to the library, which enabled him to keep up with the other noble students. This meant that Chiron's sleep time was also reduced. However, learning magic made him feel much more relieved because his dream was gradually becoming a reality. But the relief in his mind became real. His feet suddenly lifted off the ground. Chiron was bewildered. "What? My body is getting lighter? What the heck is this? I'm flying." The protagonist flew to a distant forest with no one around. A shadowy figure appeared out of nowhere, approaching the protagonist. This face made the protagonist surprised and sweat profusely. This red hair belonged to Amy Karmas. The protagonist had thought about the possibility of facing her, but who would have thought she would appear so suddenly like this? She was indeed still the same child from 5 years ago. But Amy was also a bit surprised by the protagonist's attitude. That expression proved that he still remembered who Amy was. Amy raised her hand high, and a fire appeared out of nowhere, strong and fierce. A swirling flame was close to the protagonist's face. Amy declared, "Perhaps it should end here, shouldn't it?" Will Chiron survive Amy's overwhelming pressure? Stay tuned for the next part. Peace.